Hello, this is the third season of John's letter from Silicon Valley. This is the first letter of this season. I want to talk to you about the current situation in Silicon Valley. More precisely, it is what has changed in Silicon Valley after the coronavirus epidemic. No stranger to Silicon Valley, but after all, this global public health event still interrupted many communications, and many reports were based on imagination and reasoning rather than facts. As an observer in Silicon Valley, I would like to introduce to you what Silicon Valley is worthy of our attention in my eyes. We can see the changes through Silicon Valley today, and combine with her yesterday. We can also see the changes. In terms of the characteristics of commercial society, civil society and technological society, these characteristics and laws may also be applicable to many fast-developing regions in China. Let's first talk about the economy of Silicon Valley. You may have heard that the annual GDP of the United States in the second quarter dropped by about 33%. Many media reports said that it fell, and it was one-third. In fact, there is an algorithmic problem. According to U.S. statistics, the way of GDP is a quarterly change. Put it in the whole year, it will be enlarged by 4 times because it is equivalent to calculating what will happen if this trend continues for a whole year. Therefore, the so-called GDP annualized decline by 33%. In fact, the decline in the second quarter was about 8%. What about the situation in Silicon Valley? We know that the most important industries in Silicon Valley are information technology and biotechnology industries. Let's take a look at the dramas of Silicon Valley, the 5 most representative information technology companies and 2 biotech companies. Let me start by talking about Apple. Apple's revenue in the first quarter of 2020 is basically the same as last year, with a slight increase. The main reason is that its revenue in China has a large decline that offsets the growth of other countries. Quarterly, the turnover is, how much? Nearly $60 billion of which net profit exceeded $10 billion. In the second quarter, Apple's revenue was unexpectedly 11% higher than last year, mainly in the United States and Europe. Revenue has increased sharply, and its business in China has also stopped the downward trend. After 2 quarters, Apple's turnover has approached $120 billion with increase of 5%, and half-year profits have exceeded $25 billion with increase of 10%. Taking into account huge amount and adverse global economic environment, this performance is still pretty impressive. The second company worth mentioning is Google's parent company Alphabet. Its revenue was indeed affected by the global epidemic, and its revenue fell by 2% in the second quarter, but in the first quarter, revenue increased by nearly 10%. Alphabet's revenue in 2 quarters was about $80 billion, and profit was close to $14 billion. It is worth mentioning that his YouTube business has grown rapidly during the epidemic. In addition, from the first quarter to the second quarter, he not only did not lay off staff but also hired 4,000 people. Apple and Alphabet. The annual revenue together exceeds that of Malaysia's GDP, and close to Austria. It can be said to be a wealthy country equivalent. In addition, we will not analyze the 3 other companies, Facebook, Intel and Cisco. Here I will give you a conclusion. In the first half of this year their combined turnover is close to $100 billion, an increase of nearly 10% over last year. The above data seems to show that the epidemic does not seem to have any impact on Silicon Valley's economy, but information technology companies are only part of Silicon Valley. Let's take another look. Looking at biotech companies, in this global public health event, the world's most eye-catching biomedical company was the Silicon Valley-based Gilead Sciences company that developed remdesivir. In this coronavirus epidemic, Gilead Sciences has attracted much attention. Many people have not heard of it before, because it is relatively low profile. A small example, today hepatitis B and hepatitis C are no longer so scary, because of the vaccines and drugs. It is thanks to Gilead Sciences, which is actually one of the largest biomedical companies in the world and a large company in Silicon Valley. The annual revenue is as high as $20 billion. The founder of this company, Michael Reardon, and I are both alumni of Johns Hopkins University. I had a short time meeting with him. He is a very ambitious Gilead Sciences has never hyped up and has been serious about scientific research. Its stock price has risen by 30% during the epidemic, but if I tell you it this year. The revenue in the first half of the year, on the contrary, decreased by 3%. Do you think it's strange? Actually, revenue did fall by 3%. This has been already the best performer among the major pharmaceutical companies in the world. The second largest biopharmaceutical company in Silicon Valley is Genentech. This company is currently the holding company of Roche Pharmaceuticals in Switzerland. It does not issue financial reports separately, but its parent company Roche, the revenue in the first half of this year is close to 30 billion Swiss francs. It drops by 4% and Genentech's income usually accounts for about one-third of Roche's. I asked it in background. The people in Genentech told me their income drop up to 10%, which is worse than Roche's average rate, so I am curious to know why. Because of the epidemic, everyone is afraid of going to the hospital to see a doctor. Therefore, the income of all pharmaceutical companies has dropped significantly. In fact, there are many prescription drugs, especially the anti-cancer drugs produced by Genentech, which need to be used in the hospital and cannot be taken away by patients. Less people went to the hospital to see a doctor during the epidemic, which made major pharmaceutical companies lost the income. A CTUALLY for the world's pharmaceutical industry this year. The revenue decline in the first half of the year was about 10%. I checked several well-known pharmaceutical companies including Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer. The approximate decline was about 10%. As for why the big technology companies in Silicon Valley are better performed than pharmaceutical companies, we will analyze it in detail later. Here I will give you the information first. The success of Silicon Valley depends on continuously cultivating new multinational companies, and before they become large multinational companies, these companies have to rely on venture capital to support them. So what is the situation of venture capital in Silicon Valley? Generally speaking, since the outbreak of the epidemic, the decline has been severe. In recent years, the investment transactions in Silicon Valley have been around 3,000, approximately 4,000 times. From seed round to round B to round C and so on, there should be about 300 times a month. From March to June this year, there are only about 600 investment transactions in a month, which is more than 40% less than in previous years, especially the seed round investment is 57% less. This shows that after everyone stays at home, the degree of economic activity is much worse. To measure the quality of the economy, not only the company's revenue and investment status, but also the unemployment rate, because if only individual people benefit, then the total economy, no matter how high it is of little significance to society. Although large companies in Silicon Valley have not laid off their employees, the unemployment rate has increased from 3% to the peak of 11.3% in May this year. Even though it dropped slightly in June to 10.8%. This is basically the same level as the entire United States. In the three economic crises in the United States that I personally experienced, this time the Silicon Valley's unemployment rate is the highest. When the Internet bubble burst in 2001, the unemployment rate in Silicon Valley once reached 11%, which was not as high as this peak. During the financial crisis from 2008 to 2009, Silicon Valley was hardly affected. Even after the financial crisis, the global competitiveness of Silicon Valley technology companies increased. But this time the epidemic, Silicon Valley can be described as a two-tiered world. On the one hand, the performance of companies like Apple and Google. It is very eye-catching. On the other hand, many industries must have been hit hard, otherwise the unemployment rate would not be so high. Although the Silicon Valley area gives people the impression that they are dominated by technology companies, in terms of employment, in fact, it only accounts for a small part of the employment in Silicon Valley, and most of them work in other industries. We will introduce this in detail later. Okay, I have told you so much data. I will analyze it further. Today I want to share with you 2 points of thinking. One is Ricardo's law and the other is the basic side. Regarding Ricardo's law, I wrote to you in Silicon Valley, Season 2 as mentioned in the 221st letter. You can review the corresponding content. Simply put, he is talking about the economic relationship between a regional center and its surroundings. In the center, high land prices can radiate to the surrounding economy. When the economy is good, the center will drive the surroundings to rise together. When the economy is not good, the surroundings will plummet, but because there are always people in the center who want to squeeze in, they can basically be maintained. Silicon Valley, which is one of the economic centers of the entire United States, when the economy of the United States is not doing well. Because of its global competitiveness, the impact to Silicon Valley is relatively small. This is why the overall economic situation of Silicon Valley is pretty good. My second point of analysis is about the basic side of Silicon Valley's economy, whether it is a region or a company, or even it is a person, all have the basic side. When they enter the upward trend, they will expand. For example, regions that are good at manufacturing will consider developing high-tech, companies that do IT will consider investing, and athletes who are good at running 200 meters will consider getting involved in 100 meters or 400 meters. But once the crisis comes, they have to shrink back to their individual basic sides where they are good at. For an enterprise, it is to cut off or sell some product line S. In terms of regions, non-basic industries may be shut down, and for an athlete, he will defend only the gold medal of the strongest strength, and the high-tech information industry is his basic side of Silicon Valley. Therefore, when this crisis comes, the basic side in Silicon Valley will still be well maintained, and even such a wide-ranging crisis can still allow Silicon Valley more competitive in the market. If you look at the sales record of mobile phones in the past few months, you can realize this. Apple and other large companies are growing, while most small brands are declining. Those that have caused the unemployment rate in Silicon Valley to rise, companies are actually not in the basic side of Silicon Valley. For sure, one person needs to have his own basic side. This is where everyone is based on. Advances or retreat are optional for them. If there is no basic side, a little trouble may be a huge disaster. I used to say that 10 off 90 points are not as good as one single 100 points. This is the truth in the context of upward period. When it comes to crises and challenges today, the basic side has become more important. In addition, take a look at Ricardo's law and you will discover that only high-quality assets, high-quality companies, and high-quality individuals can survive from the crisis. Therefore, both companies and individuals must find their own suitable positions in the center instead of being the king in the surrounding tiger-free places. This is what the epidemic has inspired us. So how did Silicon Valley grow into such a central area as it is today? This is about to talk about yesterday in Silicon Valley. See you in the next letter.